see if we might be having some issues here tonight with the internet. So if we are having issues, we're going to kind of start all over again. I do apologize. Like I said, we've been having some issues here big time with the internet today. I know Facebook got hit, but a lot of other internet services got hit. Even cell phone services, I know Verizon, AT&T and stuff, which is interesting because what is this show about? This show is about communication. So it's kind of one of those deals where it's like, huh, interesting. But with that, we'll still continue on here. So, as I said, and once again, I don't know how much did get out there or how much did not. We'll go ahead and just say, so the next 3 weeks, unfortunately, we're going to be doing some recorded episodes of Communications and Cigars. They'll still be on here, and they'll still be posted at 8 p.m. Monday nights here. So the next 3 weeks here, we'll be doing that. I do have some commitments, like I said. Sorry if I'm repeating, because I'm not sure if it's how it's been encoding or working there. So my apologies on that. But Noob Habano, if people didn't hear it before, that's what I'm enjoying here tonight. So let's go ahead and talk about what the installment, what the topic is about this week. So, I see a few people checking in. So, hey, let me stop here real quick before we dive into the topic. Evan, hey, John, I got my general and extra pass this weekend. Hey, congrats, Evan, congrats. Good achievement down there. Good for you. Hit the books hard. I'm glad to hear that on there. Anthony, thanks for checking in. Ben, once again, thanks for checking in this evening on here. So, unintentional segue. Evan, thanks for going ahead and posting that announcement in there. And here's why. Tonight's topic that I wanted to talk about was, what is your Radiotude? Okay? And Radiotude's like a sort of a made-up conjunction word, and that basically boils down to is, what is your radio attitude? And I think this is an important one. And the reason I say it's an important one is because it deals with or ties into how we're promoting the hobby, how we're doing things out there. Now, this kind of gets into this little bit of a touchy subject. And I'll say here's why. Because sometimes people feel that how you act is going to impact other people. And then there's the other side, sort of like I always say, the rough Twix, right Twix kind of thing. And then the other side of it is that people are going to say, well, you know what? Yeah, my attitude might impact another person, but you know what? My attitude shouldn't impact another person. And this has been one that I've talked about before. I did some videos in the past on my own, and I talked about what is your hamitude. Okay, so your ham radio attitude on there. And the reason that I said it that way is because in amateur radio, it has a very big impact on it. Very big impact, hands down. But I think more so, it also impacts how we deal with other things, how we make the bands sound the way they are. And I think it's even more ironic, and totally unplanned actually, is today being October 4th, 10/4, and today is like National CB Day. I want to say it was Dwight Eisenhower, our president. I don't know. People have to check in. If you're checking in, right in there, as anybody knows there. But Eisenhower was the president, and I believe, and he made it a national proclamation that 10/4 would be National CB Recognition kind of day on there. But how we do our Radiotude really reflects on how we act towards people, how people perceive us, how people do those kind of things. And I think that's kind of important. And it's not just for amateur radio. It's not just for CB. It's in general. Okay? And I'm going to give you a couple examples here. And we'll start out with the first one. Amateur radio will probably be the first one. And what I mean by that is I was reading on I don't know, like a message board, for sake of a better term, can kind of do that, how there were some people that were actually complaining about new people, and how the new people, they were saying there's new people coming on, and they just don't know how to do repeater etiquette. They don't know how to deal with things and blah, 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 blah. So I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting take on things. And I read along a little bit more. And they were saying how, like, they ID on the repeater, and then once they ID on the repeater, then they're like putting out their call sign and the repeater's call sign, or someone is calling out CQ and stuff like that. And then one person hopped on and said, yeah, sometimes I hop on there and I go ahead and correct them. And the other person's like, well, why should I have to hop on there and correct them? And then there was a third person on there who basically just went along and was like, I just listened to them and that kind of there. So that's your Radiotude. You know, like, okay, so if you're hopping on the repeater and you're like correcting these people, if you're for sake of a better term, belittling those people, how do you think that is going to, how's that reflective upon your Radiotude, your radio attitude? Okay. But even more so, I think it's more so to the point of like, ooh, wait a minute here. Let's go ahead and go one step further in saying that if these are new people getting an amateur radio, are we really conveying the best, like correcting them, verbally spanking them, for sake of a better term, on the radio? Are we doing that? Or should we be doing that, I guess? And once again, it boils down to, is like, how's that attitude going to be? We were all new at one time. Hands down, we were all new at one time. But we had to put ourselves in that mindset of those new people, you know, that were afraid, that are afraid, that didn't know how exactly to run or operate or go ahead and do that. We were all new at one time. You know, we didn't come birthing into the amateur radio world or the radio field, and all of a sudden, boom, there we are. We're going ahead and having those, you know, knowing all the policies and procedures. So that's that one person. That's that one example on the amateur radio side that I got on there and corrected them. Okay, then you have that other person on there. It's like, well, I'll answer them and I'll talk to them. Okay, so now that's kind of like sort of in the middle. Like they'll talk to them, kind of maybe give them some schooler pointers, invite them, welcome them. Okay. And then you have that third person I talked about who really just is like, oh, no, I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to talk to them. You know, just let them be and stuff like that. Well, okay, so now we have the two opposite sides of the spectrum. And then in the middle, we have the person who's doing something. So when we think about it, if we sit back and we think about it, how is with all those three people, how is their Radiotude? Do we want to be the person who's correcting them, schooling them, being the radio police? Do we want them the person who's not going to say anything at all and just let them go? Or are we going to be that person in the middle who's kind of like, yeah, I'll talk to them and stuff like that, encourage them and stuff like that? And you know what? Is there a right answer? No, because that is your Hamitude in that case, how your Radiotude in that case. But I think then that puts a perception on how that form of communications is thought of. Alrighty? And we'll go back now to kind of what I said, you know, today being 10/4 National CB Day, okay? You know, we always hear jokes about CB and everything like that, but, you know, as many jokes I could say about CB, there's probably a lot of ham jokes on there, okay? I remember the Velveeta shells and cheese commercial. You can look it up there somewhere. It's like, hey, you know that guy that's an amateur radio guy and stays in his basement, and you look it up. You look it up on YouTube or something like that, and it just is making fun of us. Like, hey, we're a bunch of white pasty, overweight people knocking on death's door, eating Velveeta shells and cheese in our basement, and we haven't seen this light of day in like weeks or months. You know, it's like, okay, how did we get that? Is it because of our Radiotude that we as an amateur radio society did that? Same thing with CB. Is listening to the CB and how, you know, there might be swearing and cussing and this and this and this and this. Did we get that perception? Now let's go ahead and apply it to other bands, okay? Other forms of communication. We've talked about FRS, okay? The Radiotude on FRS is people just screwing around, to be honest with you, is what I hear a lot of kids and people doing. Occasionally I'll hear businesses on there, but for the most part it's like, okay, FRS has this mindset of being this play band that people don't care about and stuff. So where did that all come from? Once again, that comes down into your Radiotude. So I look at it, and GMRS, we'll throw GMRS into the mix there. GMRS has actually what I've started to find out with GMRS, I've actually started to find out that it's advanced now to the point of, like, people are seeing GMRS as kind of starting to become a more, I'm not an amateur radio operator. I don't just want to talk about, as someone says, so what do you do as an amateur radio operator? Just basically talk about Skywarn, weather spotting, and then what kind of rigs you have or radios you have. And I'm like, okay. It's like, okay, great. How did we do that? That was our Radiotude that we have projected as an amateur community of people going out and thinking, hey, guess what? we do these kind of communications on there, right? So it really kind of, I feel it kind of comes down to an important aspect of dealing with radios. And it can easily be swayed and quickly swayed. So I'll give you an example now from the public safety side. And it's funny with the public safety side is, being a former dispatcher myself, I could tell that there are times that you as a dispatcher, you get very upset or perplexed, okay? And it kind of comes to the point of, like, if I could reach through the radio, I would strangle you, okay? So I know that, but it's funny because of the scanner listening and stuff that I'll do to, you usually hear most agencies will do the parroting, as they call it, so it's like, Med Unit 1 on, Med Unit 1 dispatch arriving on scene, or Med Unit 1 control, I'm on scene, or something like that, right? And then usually you hear dispatch, Med Unit 1 copy, you're on scene, right? It's so funny because I heard an incident the other day where a fire service was just jabbing all in there. It's like, this and this and this and this. And they were walking over people and everything like this for non-essential things. Basically going ahead and saying, we're on scene or we're en route. Like, okay, take your turn. And I could tell that the dispatcher was upset because of their Radiotude of what they had as a dispatcher, but also too is the poor Radiotude, that the fire department was having. And all the dispatcher just went and said, copy, fire trucks on scene, or copy, fire trucks are there. You can just tell. It's like, oh, he is pissed. So with that being said, it's like, okay, that's a Radiotude. So now that fire department has painted themselves into a Radiotude of people hearing them going, thinking, guys, shut up, you're being a bunch of idiots, right? And how easy is that to do that? Now, the other interesting thing I know, or I want to point out about Radiotude, and think of it this way, Radiotude, in my opinion, is very much like a credit system, okay, like a credit card. You go and instantly you're assumed you have excellent credit. Hands down, excellent credit, excellent credit. That's all I got, excellent credit, okay? And now what ends up happening is that in one felt swoop, you go to Best Buy, you go to Ham Radio Outlet, you go to your local two-way radio dealer, whatever it may be. And you take that credit card and you just, and you buy stuff. You buy stuff. No qualms in a row. Buy, right? So now, here's what happens. You had that credit, now in a quick blink of an eye, boom, you drop that credit level down. And what I mean down, like you almost maxed out your credit cards. Your credit level's now zilcho. Okay? So if it's like that, is that the same way? Does that kind of thought process or that kind of scenario situation apply to Radiotude? Meaning, is this going to be a situation now where, oh shit, sorry, but it does, like, okay, I made one goof up, I just got rid of all of my credit, all of the credibility on there, my Radiotude, I did something on the radio that now makes it all the way down to nothing. And now I'm going to have to build it up. And when I build it up, I'm going to have to build it up slowly, build it up consistently, continue to have a good Radiotude in order to get back up to that credit limit. And I'm not just talking about a certain thing on there. So I'm not talking about amateur radio. I'm not talking about business. I'm not talking about GMRS, FRS, burners, all that stuff like that. I'm talking about in general when it comes to radios. Because we could really do some things on the radios that we have multiple listeners that really are going to take it from the multiple ways. So if you really think of it in a two-way communication, you are going to have a situation where you you have it like there's person A communicating to person B. So the communication is happening there. But then you have scanner listeners. Then you have, other listeners that might be on there. Whether they're other amateurs, whether they're civilians, whether they're police officers, listen to other police officers, whether they're fellow GMRSers, whatever the case may be. You have that third group of people that are listening, but they're not involved in the conversation. So now you have this trifecta. If you have person A, how they're communicating, person B, how they're communicating, and now person or group C, which is watching how A and B communicates. And I've actually seen people that have monitored communications, not participated. They just decided to listen because maybe they only could listen or maybe they just didn't want to talk. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know is all of a sudden, wow, they're forming opinion about person A or person B or person A and B in their conversations. Or worst case, what's even happening of their communications, like the topic of their communications. So what does this mean? Does it mean that we need to change how we talk? No, it doesn't, okay? That's the glory of being in radio communications. That's the glory of having so many different opportunities to communicate in many different ways, okay? We can communicate on amateur. We can communicate in business. We could do these things based on how we need or how we want to communicate more so than anything. But then we need to walk that through. And what I mean by walk that through is saying, okay, would you be like this to that person on the radio if you were if you were face to face with that person? If you were having the eyeball QSO, if you were having the face to face, if you could, are you 10-7? Can I 10-5 with you? Okay, those kind of one-to-one kind of communications, and surprisingly, it's kind of gets into that way where, I've said that to a few people, just this conversation when I brought this subject up in the past to people, and there's a lot of people that says, no, I don't really think I would, and it kind of comes down to that social media keyboard warrior kind of thing on there, where I've heard a lot of people say it, was saying, hey, would you talk to that person in the same way you do on the radio or on, in this case, social media? Would you communicate with that person in real life the same way you would on there? Because you're behind your computer, you're safe. That person ain't going to come and get you, that kind of thing, right? And there's some people that say, yeah, I would. And it's like, yeah, okay, probably would. And there's people like, yeah, I would. And I'm like, okay, yeah, they would. And then there's other people that would be like, no, I wouldn't at all. Oh my God, what did I do? Why did I do any of that or anything like that there? So it does kind of, I feel, play into that. And once again, and this is just a discussion point here, there's no wrong or right way to do it. I hear some people that talk differently and have a different radiotude when they're on the different types of bands. And I'm one of them myself. Using multiple radio bands that I do, so amateur and business and FRS, GMRS, and MERS, all those kind of things on there. Where there's family communications of just a general communications on there. There's friend communications where I'm just going to talk to take up time. And then there's like those business communications where I need to be prim and proper and those kind of things. And yes, my Radiotude changes that. Even the public safety side, when I do, paramedic stuff, my Radiotude is very professional, streamlined to the point and everything, because it needs to be. It really needs to be. But what gets me concerned is that this kind of leads into another topic that people always bring up, and it's like, well, the repeaters are dead. The repeaters are dead. The repeaters are dead. I hear that a lot. And even my repeaters. I have a thing set up that each time the repeater keys up, I can keep a click. And sometimes I'll turn that on to see how many people are using the repeaters. And other times I don't. And sometimes when I don't, it's like I wonder if there's any more activity. And I figure there's probably not. But even when I do have those counters on, not a lot of repeater activity going on. So then that kind of asks these questions is, do you have a good overall radiotude of your repeater? Okay. Do you have a good overall radiotude of your communications at GMRS? on FRS, on business, okay? Uh, because I think that plays into it to a degree. You know, if you have one person in the club who is annoying people and whatever, that's going to go ahead and translate out onto the repeaters. If that person's talking on the repeaters, people are not going to like it. Do you have that one person on the net who's a know-it-all, hands down is a know-it-all, knows everything about it and blah, 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 blah? That's going to translate over to that repeater if they're on the repeater and actively talking on there, because that's the Radiotude that builds up. So is our lack of repeater usage, is our repeater usage down because of technology, or is it because of new people coming in for the amateur world, or what have you, and there's not a training, there's not this kind of thing on there? I know from the business side of things, you know, when I have business customers on repeaters and stuff like that, the Radiotude can be preset. It could be almost have a predisposition on it. Same thing with public safety. You know, training on the public safety side. We do a lot of radio training. As a matter of fact, in September, I did a lot of radio training with the ambulance service and told them, you know, kind of key couple things on there. You know, the using, you know, we use on our service the me to you when we're talking with dispatch or other units. You know, unit 1 to unit 2. Alrighty. But when we talk to the hospitals, they have it differently where they're the other way of me from you. So it's like, you know, local hospital, here is unit 1. Now, that's okay because we predispose them to the radio, the etiquette, the protocol, how it needs to be done. And this is how it needs to be done. There's not a lot of variance in the room. This is how it needs to be done. Now, with that being said, once again, public safety, business, to a degree, FRS and GMRS, you can kind of do that in the same way too. But then we have the other aspect of things, and that other aspect of things is then going to come into being the amateur, where we know how to ID, we know how to call sign, but we're infants. We're I don't know. You could almost say, you know, we can almost be saying, you know, bastards of communication. And what I mean by that is that we're by ourselves, we're alone at first. That first time we're doing a QSO, you know, the times I've talked to people during their that have been in their first QSOs, they have told me they've had no one else by them. They've taken the test, they have the radio in front of them, and they're listening, and they're listening, and they're listening, but they've never had the chance to do it. Now the repeater's quiet, then they get on the radio. And then what do? Well, then they have to learn how it is. You know, and then are they being met with the, you know, hi, this is, you know, N9 and you know, KD9 XYZ monitoring the N9 UPC repeater. Is anyone around? Yeah, this is blah, 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 blah. You know, hey, yeah, we hear you, but you don't need to give the repeaters call signs and this and this and this and this. And, you know, it's like, oh my goodness. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay. Now you just went overboard, because now if that person has mic fright, now once again, it's like, oh my goodness. Now are you beating them into corner? Are you beating them into submission? Because it's not something that, is it your Radiotude that you don't like? Is it maybe the repeater has a certain protocol or group sets on there? So it kind of goes all along the way. But that's where I thought it would be kind of a good subject, because I've seen this a lot. There's been a lot of classes that have been coming up that I've seen people have hosted, and a lot of people getting their test, getting their license for the first time. You know, we complain about, you know, a lot of these people starting to be appliance operators and this and this and this and, you know, whatever. And I'm guilty of that too a little bit on there. But then you start to look at it, it's like, why does a person join a club and then, or a group, or join a repeater group, or whatever you have, you see them, they're involved, they're active and everything like that, and all of a sudden, boom, they dwindle down. Why is that? And I've asked myself a lot, you know, like, why is that happening? What is the correlation? You know, how did we go from them getting in the club, being active, excited, I want to do this and this and this and this, and then getting to the point here of like, well, they're not heard from anymore. They're not on that. They're not. What is the disconnect down there? So that's where I thought tonight would be a good thing about doing the Radiotude. And I don't know. It's something that I think we all take for granted. We just take it. It's an attitude kind of thing. It's a persona. I guess we could say your radio persona, because there's some people are like this and this and this. For the longest time, people used to joke around and call it, "Hey, John, you're Mr. Digital," because whether it was amateur or whether it was public safety or whether it was business, I usually was always on some sort of digital modulation mode of some sort or on some digital frequency. But then what ended up happening is that I started to find out that my Radiotude was getting to the point where people were thinking I was digital. There's people who don't want to do digital. There's people who want to do analog. And I've kind of been more so of like, yeah, analog can coexist within modes that allow analog and digital. So like amateur, you could do digital and analog voice. Business, digital analog voice. Public safety, digital analog. Some, yes, you can't do digital. You can't do digital on FRS, can't do digital on MERS, can't do digital on GMRS. But that's fine. Okay, that's fine. People are not getting to that point. But it was coming, like I said, coming down to the point where it's like, you're not flexible. It's always like you always want digital. And that's where I sat back and started saying, whoa, my Radiotude, my radio persona is saying it's got to be digital or nothing. And that's not the case at all. That's definitely not the case. And nor should it be. I do like digital, yes, but analog's pretty fun too. So I don't know. That was just kind of a I thought an interesting topic. When I've talked to people about it, a lot of people saying, I never thought of that. I never, this and this and this and this. So that's where I thought it was a good idea to bring it up and talk on the topic tonight here. So, a couple of here. Let's see. Let's check the comments here. The news bulletin feature and wire. So once again, Anthony, this is not a branded page. If you have something about a specific manufacturer, go to that manufacturer's page. Communications Cigars, we stress, we are non-branded, non-manufactured. We don't want to get into this war and stuff like that. So people have asked if we could talk about radios, and maybe we might do that in there, but it's a non-branded thing. Just we're here to talk about things kind of in general and kind of go from that point there. Let's see here. Being a good listener is helpful and does bring a good speaker. Okay, so that is a good point, Anthony, because you're right, it does. The art of communication is kind of down too. I've told that to my wife. I told that to my kids. I tell that to my folks and family members that I talk to and stuff, where it's like, these days you're so worried about, people are so worried about offending or doing something or something like that, that the communication is gone. Communication is transmitting a message, or as they say, even the American Heart Association for ACLS goes ahead and talks about it, but it's transmitting a message or conveying a message or an idea, getting feedback on there, whether it be positive or negative, and then going ahead and maybe doing a reply communication or somehow starting and ending that conversation or that communication piece on there. And I think so many people these days are afraid to go ahead and do that. And so, yes, being a good listener, talking that kind of thing to people and making sure that you're understanding their points is very important. And that I will say is a good part of the Radiotude also. When you're talking, are you understanding what they're saying? Are you replying back? Are you listening but you don't have anything to say? That's fine. You could do that. That doesn't hurt to say that, And I've done that a few times. I've talked to people and this and this, and I'll reply back, I guess I don't really know. I don't really have an opinion on that either way. I guess my view on it is blah, 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 blah. And I know some people have been taken back by that. I would venture to say you could probably ask a fair amount of my high school teachers as well as family members and saying, John did not have an opinion is something is wrong with him, get him to the hospital quickly. But it is a good point. So thank you for bringing that up there. So hi to a couple people. So Andy over there, 2E0, God, I gotta get glasses or something. REE, so good evening. Hey, K5 VPC in Texas. Hey, good evening to you there too. So you know what? That's about it. I've been rattling on here. Sorry, we got a little bit of a late delay. It's been kind of goofy with the whole internet thing today. Just reiterating, if you're joining us again. So unfortunately for the next 3 Mondays in a row, I will go ahead and I will be doing some recorded sessions of Communication with Cigars. And I have a couple special things coming up here. So, and the only reason I say that is because I do have some personal commitments that I have to attend to and stuff. I do like doing the show. People seem to enjoy the show, the installments. I've gotten some great feedback on there. I've gotten some very nice emails. Some people share some personal things with me. I don't. I wish I could share them, but I haven't asked for that person's permission to share it. But it did say, you know what, I'm going to continue with this and do this interaction, stuff like that on there. We can kind of proceed where it goes. I've got a lot of cool suggestions. I've had some people have asked. They said, John, we've seen your Facebook picture and we've seen a couple different things and stuff on there and whatever, and it looks like you have multiple radios. Would you sometime, one person asked, said, hey, would you tell us about what kind of handheld radios you have there? That might be one. John, would you talk about the different types of technology out there? Is one email I received. So maybe we have a few things that are coming up here that will do that. I have kind of somewhat of a special guest to me, maybe not necessarily you guys. They'll be coming up in one of the recorded episodes, so definitely stay in there. So, so just kind of look at some of the other comments on here. Okay, yeah, by the way, hey, if anybody did, if you're in and you're smoking a cigar, I need to know what it is. So check in the comments there. Once again, I'm doing a noob, what was it here? A noob Habano. And then I see smoking flathead tonight. Oh, nice, nice. So here's a good thing. Dan brings up the comments and chats down here. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat here. If we want a vibrant ham community, we all need to be kind and helpful to each other, especially with those new to the hobby. All of us have some contribute to the hobby. W1MUZ. Dan, once again, good point. I said that on there. Good point. You know, let's make sure our Hamitude is really good on there. Radiotude is very good on there. So, thank you everybody for checking in this evening. Sorry we had a little bit of a rough start. Like I said, the internet was goofy, something fierce today. Continue on there. Don't forget, we will do the comments on live replay. We're getting this all kind of squared away finally and stuff like that. I have some behind-the-scenes staff here that have been helping me, so we're kind of getting this all spooled up in there. But next 3 weeks, we're going to be doing recorded. But even though we're going to be doing recorded, I won't be able to do it live. That's why I have to do it recorded, but I hopefully will be able to be there via keyboard. So hopefully I'll be able to lurk in the chats a little bit and kind of chat back and forth there with you all. So until then, we're going to get down to 47 degrees tonight, northwest, west central Wisconsin evening. Thank you from the studio porch for tuning in to this week's episode of Communications and Cigars. And guess what? Enjoy your cigars, and we'll see you next week.